Hey, hockey coaches, how are you? For the last 19 years, I've been training hockey players and coaching hockey players, and I've had the privilege of coaching guys like Aaron Ekblad and Dalton Prout and Zach Kassian and several NHL players and thousands of kids, and I've done practices and I've done it all. So I started puckfacehockey.com about a year ago to really get into coaching the coaches, and that's what I've done. So we've got several people signed up all over North America and Europe. But now I really want to get into coaching the coaches and have a real serious push on this. So I was thinking the other day, like, what makes a good coach? And when I started doing the coaching aspect and training hockey players, I always felt like it was important to be a role model, so that if I ran into a coffee shop 15, 20 years later, I'd be someone that people would look at and say, hey, that guy had an influence in my life, and they'd be happy to talk to me, and they'd see me, and we'd have a good conversation, and that's how it's gone. So which made me really think about one of the coaches that I had growing up. His name was Mr. Rose, Harold Rose, back when I was a kid. So he coached me for about 4 or 5 years, and this is what I remember about him. I can honestly say I don't remember if he was a great hockey coach, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I mean that from the fact that he was so good at other things that I don't remember the X's and O's of hockey, the systems and all that kind of stuff. A little bit I do, because he was obviously fairly good. But what really stood out to me was Mr. Rose was a guy that pushed us. He was a guy that taught us as much as he can about hockey, because he spent time on our skills, and it was appropriate to our ages, from 11 years old to 15 years old. And he got us into fitness, and he cared about our lives. So here's what I mean by that. When Mr. Rose coached us from a young age, he would spend a lot of time doing skill development. So most of our practices were hard skating skills. After practice, a lot of practices he would make us do fitness. So he would taught us fitness, taught us how to run, how to do some plyometrics. He was way ahead of his time at the time. But what I remember mostly about that is there was some of the parents were kind of like, why is he doing this? He would even run after or before games. He made sure that we were fit. But what I liked about it even more than that is that he actually did it with us. So he set an example of fitness and pushing yourself. So he made us push ourselves. There's a lot of days that we didn't want to do it, but he would get his tracksuit on and he would get out there and he would work out with us, which was impressive. And that was something that I carried along as I coached guys. I always wanted to make sure that I was fit and I could perform for them, and that you can relate to them, because if you can do the fitness with your players, you're setting an example, and then what kid doesn't want to be better than the coach? So that's a great thing. Another thing that I remember is he cared about us off the ice. So off the ice, there was a time when I was about 14 years old where he saw me at school, because he was a teacher as well, and I was hanging around with the wrong types of guys. And he didn't embarrass me in front of people. He just said, hey, Andy, how you doing? And we went to practice that night, and he pulled me aside, and he just basically looked at me and said, what are you doing? Why are you hanging out with these people? And he explained to me that these were bad people and that was going to lead me down the wrong path, and I took it to heart because I had a lot of respect for him. So it showed me that he cared. And I know that for a fact that, when I'm coaching players, very easily I could tell them everything I know about hockey. But until they know that I care about them, they don't care about the hockey thing. I'm just another voice. So if you show your students or your players that you actually care about them, they're going to actually want to perform. And the great thing about Mr. Rose is that 20 years later, I moved away from home when I was very young. But when I went and visited my hometown, it's one of the first people I went to see was Mr. Rose. And he was great to see me. He looked great. He was still fit. And someone that I still wanted to impress and tell him all the good things I'm doing in hockey, make some phone calls to him just to keep up to date. And I think it might surprise him a little bit, but that's the effect you can have on your players and your students when you're a kid. I talked to my son and my wife and my family about Mr. Rose, because he's had a big effect on my life. And I think that's very, very important. Listen to me. At the end of the day, your players are not going to remember what your breakout systems were and all the X's and O's in the game. What they're going to remember is a relationship with the coach, and they're going to say, that was a great guy, I learned a lot from him. Or he's going to sit there and they're going to say he cared more about himself and about winning. So that's just something I wanted to leave with everybody. When you're teaching, one of the things you want to make sure you're doing is that you care about your your students or your players, and that you're an example to them. So fitness is one thing. And the other thing that Mr. Rose had is he had a lot of energy. And every time I saw him, he was in a good mood, and he was always willing to help and always had energy. Part of that was the fitness, and that was something that carried with myself anyways. And you know, to this day, I think about Mr. Rose and what would Mr. Rose do, or what would Mr. Rose say in this situation. So that's just a thought for you. Hope you enjoy that. Have a great day.